Hello, I'm Albert Cazona from Barco, and I'm here at RSNA 2024. I'd like to talk to you about the Coronis One Look. I'll give a little demonstration of some of the features. Before I start, I'll demonstrate one of the most important things, and that is that the display is very adjustable, right? The most important thing when someone's using it is that it be easy for them to see. So here we can adjust this to be the height and the way we want to have it set up for the person who's using it, that they can be looking at it in a way that's comfortable and that they're not staring up into space. Okay, I'm going to start with the feature DL Precise, which is a tool to help analyze breast density that's included with the many of the Coronis One Look displays. So if we look at this, we have a case here where we might want to measure this density. And so first we turn on the tool, and now we can wander around and it will colorize the various dense areas of dense tissue, and so that someone can look at the boundaries and the texture of it. And if I look at this one here, I say, okay, now I would like to get a measurement of that. So I turn on the measurement tool, and then I might want to also measure that in the other view. So I will proceed to create a second measurement, and I can do that by coming over here and looking at the this view. And over here now, I can similarly make a measurement, and so it's possible then for someone to make a comparison between these two. The next part that I'd like to demonstrate is really about the workflow that's typical of screening in mammography. And so here we have a typical case with the currents below and the priors up above, and someone is going to go through a series of steps. But before I show you what it's like on the Coronis One Look, I'm going to show you what it was like with the previous generations of displays. So here, this represents 12 million pixels, which was what we typically had on our previous model. It's in, of course, this display, which has 32 million pixels. So it's being shown like this. It would in fact be, the full size of a display, but just for the purpose of the demonstration, I'm going to show it like this. And here are those images, and the steps it's going to go through are, first, it's going to show the CC views, one against the other. But it turns out that this is not enough resolution to show the full resolution of the detectors. And so over here, you can see that the detector has a resolution of 70 microns. The resolution that we're just capturing is 92 microns. So it's actually every pixel on the screen represents a combination of the detector pixels. Thus, it's blurring a bit the image, but it gives people the context. And so then people would typically make a second step where now they can finally see the full resolution of the detector, but they're only seeing part of the image. So then they would continue on and they would show the other part of the image. But there's actually another little bit here that didn't quite fit even so. And so it had to move that over. And now it's going to look at the part over here and look at the MLO. And similarly, it has to go back and forth to show the different parts of that. Finally, then you can go on to the part where it's looking at the current and the prior from the different views. And at last you come to the end. So this is the way things were in the past. This is contrasted by how it is now with the Coronis One Look. With the Coronis One Look, we have that same overview, but of course, now we have more pixels, so the resolution of the image is higher. And when we go to this second step with the CC views, the entire image data that was represented in the acquisition is now available on the screen at once. So those steps of moving it around, those will all be swept away, and the very next step will be the MLO view. And from there, it would go on and follow the same path where it's going to compare against the prior for the different views. And then we come to the end. So you can see that quite a few steps were removed. And this does two things. One is it saves time. And of course, that's valuable. People's time is they could be spending it doing something else, reading more exams, getting paid more, or doing other work. But there's another important reason. When we had that view here with the Unity, and we were at this stage, this is the first time someone is really presented with the whole picture, but it still isn't the whole detail. And so they're in a difficult spot where you're supposed to start to form your opinion, but in fact, you know you're supposed to wait to see all of the rest of it, which will be presented to you in pieces. So it's a very uncomfortable situation, which really is fundamentally resolved by having the one-look display show the picture at the full resolution. So I think that's one of the things that is most important about the Coronis OneLook is this higher resolution and how it affects the screening workflow. The next thing that I'd like to explain about the Coronis OneLook is the convenience of having a touch bar. So the touch bar has different things on it, and it can be lit up, and then when you want, you can push, when you get close, it gets bright. And I can push something like I can push a button, Illuminate, to brighten up the whole screen. So now the whole screen gets brighter. I can toggle that on and off. It can make it easier to see small things on the picture. I can also bring up applications. So this could be, for example, launching Zoom, or to do conferencing, or bringing up an online encyclopedia to look up the terminology for some particular cases. So all these sorts of things can be put on these customizable buttons that can either follow a shortcut that is used in the application or launch a specialty application that's only used occasionally. It's probably not the thing someone would use instead of the buttons on their mouse or their custom keypad, but for things, because then they're wanting to be very ergonomic, but it could be something that you reach up and do because it's something you do a couple times a day. And you could have, the clock, it can give you the status of the quality assurance program. So all these kinds of things can be set on this touch bar. And then when it's not being used, it dims itself down because it doesn't notice anybody proximate to it. So that's, I think, one of the important things, the convenience of this. And maybe one couple last things I would call attention to is we put on here the button to control the soft glow. And so this lets you turn off the task light and turn it on if you have something that you're trying to do down here. Also, you can turn on the spot view, which gives you that bright spot that you can move around the screen, even much brighter in here than it is typically, but then it dims what's around so that it doesn't overwhelm you with too much light. So those are the things that are on the taskbar. A really important aspect of the Coronis OneLook is how nice it makes the images look. Really, it's the whole purpose of the display to be able to show people the images in a very clear fashion that let them appreciate the content of them. So here's an example where you have a breast image with the fatty area and then the glandular tissue, and you can appreciate where those are, and you can really appreciate the texture, almost like being able to step up and down in this in 3 dimensions. And so this I think is a very good example of what we're trying to do to make that more visible. And then on another image I have here, you can really appreciate how detailed the calcifications are, and you can see the shape of them, whether they are round punctate or whether they are in fact a little bit linear or pleomorphic, all different shapes. So being able to appreciate that comes from having the very, very high resolution of the Coronis One Look. Lets you see the full resolution of the X-ray detector. The next aspect I'd like to demonstrate on the Coronis One Look is how rich the colors are. So if we look at this image, not only does it have a very vibrant color, because the Coronis One Look has a full Adobe RGB gamut, unlike earlier displays which only had an sRGB gamut. But also the colors are calibrated, so they're very smoothly arranged. And I'm going to flip back and forth between a way that many displays have, which is not having a calibrated color and just using the same curve as they use for gray shades, and what we have in the steady color, which is available on the Coronis One Look. So if I go here, I can simulate the situation where the grays are calibrated, but now the colors are not. No one's paid any attention to that. And what you'll see is that the red and the green, a lot of those portions of the rainbow are confused. They all look the same. And then other areas change very rapidly. So you can see the differences there, but there's very little of it left. So that's how it is if you don't color calibrate. But with a steady color calibration, then this becomes very smooth, and the subtlety in the image is pronounced, because you can have a wider range of orange and yellow, cyan and such, that lets you more appreciate how the tissues are changing. It also helps because if we look at images like this, just the amount of color that's in things that are supposed to be colored make it easier to see the details in this ultrasound, or to appreciate the coloring that's been applied to the segmented values here on these CT images. So that's I think one of the features of the Coronis One Look, is it now has a much wider gamut than was available before, but also it's calibrated to be perceptually linear.